Hey everyone, happy Monday. Welcome back after what I hope is a great summer weekend for you. It's time to shake out those Saturdays and Sundays though, because it's Monday. It's Monday morning and we've got our Monday gang crew here to go over stuff with you. Let me introduce you to them quickly. The people of all regular gang members here. So we've got our Tracy Ragan, Jack Polar, Dr. Stacey Thayer, Mitch Ashley, and of course the Dean Mike Vizard. Mike, hope you had a good weekend.
I did.
These Yankees are heartbreakers.
All right. I'm making a little tour of New York State starting tomorrow. So
good for you. Enjoy it. Enjoy it. All righty. Hey, gang, we're going to start off with a look at a mid-year look, let's call it, at the CNCF open source 200 some odd products in there. Projects, not products, excuse me. They're projects, they're open source. But there's 200 of them. They highlighted some of the movers and shakers. Mike, what do we got?
Yeah, if you look at the report that they published, it wouldn't come as much as a surprise that there's a lot of usage and adoption of Kubernetes. It's kind of always been the lead poster child. But there's also a lot of uptake on open telemetry, which in my mind is bigger than cloud native itself. It goes well beyond that. And then there's all these other projects, some of which are now starting to maybe get enough traction on their own. Things like Argo are starting to see a lot more usage and adoption. But Tracy, you live in this space. Is there anything in this report that kind of leapt out at you?
Well, first of all, it's near and dear to my heart. The CNCF has been an amazing open source foundation. It really has. The growth that it's experienced over the last, 5 years is incredible. I think Backstage kind of leaped out at me. And Backstage probably is a reflection of platform engineering. But, when you look at what Backstage is, it's another kind of tool that where you're doing plugins around. And I believe that will get disrupted with new ways of doing things. And maybe Backstage will be the ones to disrupt it. But when I look at a report like this, and Backstage is unique because I think the company it started, it was Roadie, and they're kind of like us. They're small, they've pushed it, and they've done an amazing job of building a platform for platform engineers. But what it makes me think about truly is when you look at those numbers, you have to really see what's inside those numbers in terms of contributors, particularly like Kubernetes, because it's the giants that are contributing. We don't see, when you look at that, you go, there's thousands of, hardworking, volunteering contributors, but many of those contributors are paid by Microsoft, by Apple to do those open source projects. And that's really what's driving some of these projects. Now, if you look at the broad scope, even Argo and some of the smaller projects that we're seeing in those 200, if you ever take a look at the CNCF landscape, it'll make you dizzy. But the smaller projects are truly being driven by small companies who are trying to leverage and make a business out of the CNCF. But in reality, the contributors are coming from the big companies. So Kubernetes is an very important project for every single company that is trying to do digital transformation. And it doesn't surprise me that it's on the top of the list. So I think that we have to look at and be realistic about who those contributors are and, give every contributor a pat on the back who's in one of those smaller projects that are not getting noticed, who are doing this because they love open source and they want to provide tooling that their community can benefit from. But we're going to see a lot more. And there is a danger to what's happening at the CNCF. I can see it being too big. The weight of itself is too much to carry. And the problem has become is that every project wants to be part of the CNCF. The CDF even is losing projects to the CNCF because that's where Kubernetes is. That's where the money is. That's where the attention is. And so it gets diluted, right? It gets a little bit diluted. Those 200 projects, I don't believe all of them should be there. In fact, I would argue that Argo should be in the CD Foundation. And there are security tools that should be in the OpenSSF. So it's a little bit I would call it a bloated look at the projects. And if you really look at the contributors, there's a lot of big companies who pay contributors to do the work.
Yeah. So, a couple of things. First of all, for anyone who looks at the article, there's this bubble chart of all the different projects. I should mention that's not just CNCF projects. That's actually all the Linux Foundation projects. And the list of the movers and shakers is not just CNCF as well. There are also Linux ones on there. But that being said, when we look at just the CNCF, Tracy, I agree with you, 200 plus and growing projects is a lot. I've spoken to the CNCF people about this, and they feel they'll just keep taking projects as long as because that's their charter, and it sort of becomes the child who eats the parent almost, right? Or it's that one big bird in the nest that's taking all the food, and all the other little baby birds aren't as big and they're not as healthy, and that's not healthy for the whole ecosystem at some level. And I don't disagree there. The other thing I would mention, though, is this is momentum, not just who has the most developers, but who's adding the most developers, who's adding the most other key metrics. And when you look under the covers a little bit, yes, Kubernetes still rules the roost, but OpenTelemetry may have, in fact, more velocity than Kube, which is
They probably have, I would guess they have
contributing.
more end users. It definitely is, the end users who
Well,
are usually
yeah.
actually implementing. Yes.
the velocity is there. I too was happy to see Backstage on there. There's another article on our platformengineering.com site I wrote about Backstage specifically. So Backstage was Spotify, if I'm not mistaken. Right.
Right.
And
Backstage with Spotify.
And then they contributed, they gave it to the CNCF in 2022. So in just 3 years, it's shot up into the top 30 there, and it's rising with a bullet. But at the same time, as I think you'll see in my article on platform engineering, Spotify's now come out with a hosted version of Backstage, a SaaS version that they charge for. And there are some other internal developer platform competitors out there, because the story with Backstage is the same thing that not plagues, but it's the same story we hear with a lot of open source stuff. It's hard to use, it's command line, it's not as polished, it's not that commercial version. And if that's the kind of person, go use the SaaS version. But anyway, Argo and Flux, the two GitOps players, absolutely are hitting strides. Look, overall, it's a very healthy market at the top, but I'd like to see the bottom 50 of the 200 and see what kind of numbers they have, because those people may in fact be better served finding someone who can show them a little more love, a little more time.
Yeah, it's
We
hard
used
as an open source, running an open source project within the Linux Foundation. When you're one of those small ones, it's hard to find the love. You really have to make you have to make a lot of noise.
Mitch, I have a conspiracy theory. My conspiracy theory.
Okay.
Is point.
Monday morning conspiracy theory. All right,
There
I'm
you
up
go.
for it.
It was Epstein, wasn't it?
And
They'll
it
release
goes
the file
on me, right? The project teams, because they're funded by vendors, are not exactly all that interested in making everything easier, because their vendors are creating the commercial version to make things easy. And there's not enough time and effort in being put into making things easy, because it's just not in anybody's economic interest.
Hold it. You mean there's gambling going on here? There's financial interest happening? Oh my gosh. My heart's broken for open source. No, I mean, it's real. I mean, companies are contributing because that's in their financial interest. It isn't pure altruism. Maybe it's not even altruism at all, right? They may not actually be major open source advocates as much as it's important to their business. And if it wasn't for that, maybe they wouldn't be. I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody, but it's you have to also look at the other side of it. That also drives a lot of the innovation. and moving projects forward, whether they're new ones that are contributed, like we talked about Backstage, where it's accelerated 2 and 3 years, or Kubernetes and Kubeflow and OpenTelemetry, I think, is the kind of poster child for involving a lot of people, a lot of vendors out of an ecosystem to work together. So much so that both Kubernetes and I think OpenTelemetry too has kind of passed the cloud native moniker, at least in terms of their use. Alan, you and I were talking about this the other day. Is Kubernetes really a cloud native thing anymore? It's really a workflow engine, workflow system that works on anything, AI applications, or what it doesn't matter what it is, anything that's containerized, and it could be a cloud native app, quote unquote. So I think on the plus side, I'm super happy that we've got a great ecosystem of open source, and with what the CNCF is doing, I don't have an appreciation like you do, Tracy, of what it is to be one of the small teams and projects, and I'm sure that's a struggle. Maybe that's something the CNCF could take on, is how do we identify projects that have a lot of promise but need a little bit of help, need that sort of that startup nudge, get them to the next tier to help them accomplish that, and maybe find a sponsor or two.
And there may be projects like OpenTelemetry that are bigger than cloud native, and maybe it's time for them to move on and become their own little foundation. I don't know. I'm just putting it out.
I kind of think so.
The project I thought we would see in that list was OpenTofu.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's had enough runway to really, because that's a hard list to crack, right?
Oh, yeah.
You got to.
Yes.
And so I'd say if it's not on by next year, or maybe by the end of this year, because this was just a mid-year look, let's see, end of year look, then I'd say, okay, maybe there was a lot of smoke and not as much fire there.
That's a good one, Tracy. I agree with you.
They're not abandoning the Hashi stuff. Anyway, though, it's a colossus, right? This CNCF and the whole open source world around it. I was just interviewing the CEO of Root.io, and they're doing agentic remediation on the fly of a lot of these open source tools and components that we're seeing in there, even the OSs. And they donated a project to the CNCF too, Slim or something.
How about we see an AI agent for all these projects, and that'll make it easier, because that one AI agent can figure out how to learn all these things, right? Or do I need 100 AI agents because there's 100 projects? I don't know.
Maybe
can
they're
be the
just
maintainers.
sub-agents. I want to be your secret agent, man, right? Let's get that song going.
I always
Yeah,
knew
that's
out of it's going to be like Downton Abbey. There's going to be a head butler agent, and then there's going to be all these other agents working downstairs taking care of stuff.
But I think about that. Are they other agents, or are they just alter egos, sub-agents, if you will, of that master agent?
Well, it's funny you say that, Mike, because Walmart just announced that they're actually doing exactly that. They discovered they had way too many agents, and so they're now consolidating and having one agent, one master agent for consumers, another master agent for their vendor suppliers, another master agent for the developers, which will then farm out work to all of the sub-agents that you were talking about, right?
Yeah.
So you're saying we're having layoff of agents. Wow. That's
and
a
this
first.
goes to that there's that amazing discussion that we should still be having around how to lay these agents out. And a domain structure will be so critical, and it's not always about LLMs, right? We have to start making a more container, or I shouldn't say use the word container, but more specialized and more domain specific.
I'm with you.
And we should have that conversation on one of these calls.
We will. I know someone. I can make that happen. We'll put it out there.
I will pencil that in for a week from today.
All righty. All right, guys. Hey, we're going to take a break here on TechStrong Gang, and let's come back and talk a little digital transformation, modernization. I don't know what you call it. You're watching TechStrong Gang.